Paddy, Hillary Clinton making what I suppose were the strongest comments we've heard from the US on this issue, but nonetheless, not particularly powerful comments, were they?
No, not particularly strong. This is the first time we've actually seen her, though, come out and speak, basically reiterating a statement that they put out Monday at about 5 p.m. Eastern time. So really all yesterday, pretty much radio silence from the administration, other than to put out a travel warning, which was more strongly worded than we normally see, telling Americans to get out if they could, if not to hunker down, basically, and hide. We are hearing from the State Department that they are having trouble getting their embassy workers out and their family workers. They haven't been able to do that. I've reached out to my sources at the Pentagon, asked sometimes U.S. military is put on standby, put on alert to be able to go in and get Americans out of situations like this. So far, they tell me they've gotten no requests from that. But as far as from the Obama administration, really, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton making the only on-camera comments. President Barack Obama has been speaking about the economy today, and he has not mentioned Libya.
Clinton also mentioning the broader issue of Middle Eastern events, bringing in Tunisia and Egypt into the whole conversation, which kind of makes you think that they're lumping Libya in with the other events, which isn't necessarily a particularly accurate portrayal.
No, and I think what you've seen from this administration, and repeatedly they've been putting out the same line, is every country's different, but it's not for us to get involved. Friday, we saw the same thing from President Obama. He put out a written statement, and he said, I want to see restraint in Bahrain, in Yemen, and in Libya, so lumping them all together. Now, after this incredible violence that we've seen in Libya, or we've been reporting in Libya, we really haven't seen the administration take any steps. Now, after the protesters were fired on in Bahrain, President Obama did pick up the phone. He spoke to the king himself. His national security advisor spoke to the prince, and they put out very powerful statements. You haven't seen that in Libya. Now, what analysts around the capital will tell you is because Bahrain is a key ally to the United States, they have that relationship, they feel they have some leverage with the Fifth Fleet being based in Bahrain. When it comes to Libya, if you look at the recent history, for decades these countries have been open adversaries. You saw America singled out repeatedly from Colonel Gaddafi today. They've reestablished diplomatic relations just in the last few years under the past President Bush, but they don't feel that they have that leverage. They don't have aid. They don't have a military base there. They really are signaling that the U.S. doesn't feel like it needs to or wants to get involved directly very much when it comes to Libya. They're pointing towards the United Nations for action.
Just a bit of speculation, Patty. P.J. Crowley, the State Department press spokesman, was asked a short while ago whether he'd seen the Gaddafi press conference, and he said that he had. And he was asked about it, and he said, well, I haven't been briefed on the response to that Gaddafi comment. Are they trying to back away from involvement in this?
I think you can see that they don't want to get involved, and there have been activists who said the U.S. is not powerless in this. There are things that the United States could do. There are sanctions. There are U.S. oil companies at work in Libya. You do have an embassy. You can reach out to Libyan officials. And it was interesting because on Sunday, the State Department put out a message that they had contacted Libyan officials, and Libyan officials had promised to protect the rights of protesters. So what happened to that dialogue? We haven't heard very much about that. When it comes to the broader region, they have been very critical of countries like Iran. The president himself spoke when it came to Egypt. You've seen him pick up the phone when it comes to Yemen and Bahrain. But on Libya, really, we've just seen staff members call. We've seen statements. So far, we haven't seen the administration really weigh in on this other than what the secretary said today. And as you mentioned, it wasn't just Libya. She mentioned Bahrain. She mentioned Yemen. She mentioned the broader region.
All right. Patty Colhane, live in Washington, D.C. Thanks, Patty. Now, across the border from Libya, Egypt's military government says it has reinforced its border, but it's doing all it can to help sick and injured Libyans to leave the country. Jamal El-Shail is in Saloum, which is on the Egypt side of the border, near the crossing. He sent us this report.
As the violence in Libya grips the world's attention, thousands of Egyptians have been making it across the border crossing behind me here in the Egyptian city of Saloum. They tell of horrific tales of mercenaries and attacks across the country. The eastern parts of Libya seems to be under the control of the people, those opposing Muammar Gaddafi. In fact, the Libyan side of this border crossing no longer has any presence of security forces loyal to the Libyan leader. As night falls, the Egyptian military government has made it clear that it is beefing up its presence here. It has also set up mobile hospitals to help those injured and to try and give some sort of assistance to those fleeing. Egyptian NGOs have also put together several aid convoys carrying thousands of bags of much needed blood and other equipment to try and relieve those on the other side of the border in Libya. However, the tale here is of thousands of Egyptians who no longer have jobs, who have returned with graphic images of what has been going on. And it is only difficult to try and imagine exactly what has happened there.
And let's just fill you in with some of the developments that have been taking place over the past 24 hours or so. A Libyan naval vessel has turned up in the waters near Malta, and there are suggestions that the crew want to defect to Malta. This after a couple of pilots from the Libyan Air Force also turned up in Malta asking to defect. Meanwhile, the Arab League meeting in Cairo was discussing this crisis, and the conclusion they came to was that Libya won't be allowed to attend any more meetings of the Arab League. The European Union has also been meeting, and it decided to suspend a framework trade agreement that it was negotiating with Libya. Meanwhile, Turkey has sent 2 rescue ships to evacuate its citizens from the country, and the Netherlands is sending a plane to take Dutch nationals out of the country. And Italian officials have reported that marine oil terminals in Libya have now halted their operation. The threat to oil supplies has meant prices on the oil markets are touching 2-year highs. Meanwhile, at the United Nations, the human rights chief has called for an inquiry into the attacks on protesters in Libya, saying they might amount to crimes against humanity. Let's go to our London news centre to get some of the reaction out of Europe. Felicity Barr is there for us. Felicity.
All right, thanks, Taimur. Yes, first of all, the British Foreign Minister says he's appalled by the levels of violence being used against protesters in Libya. In another strong statement, William Hague dismissed Gaddafi's claims of an international conspiracy against the Libyan government, and he also announced plans to help British nationals get out of Libya. Well, AlJazeera's Rory Challens is outside the British Foreign Office for us in central London. So, Rory, yet again hearing some tough words from the UK Foreign Minister about Libya.
Yes, well, William Hague was obviously listening to Colonel Gaddafi's speech earlier, and about those claims from Gaddafi that there is an international conspiracy against him. Well, William Hague said that simply wasn't true, that the people who wanted Gaddafi out were his own countrymen and countrywomen. So for the second day running, William Hague condemns the violence that's being used against anti-government protesters in Libya. He says he wants that violence to stop, and he backs UN calls for an investigation into the killings, and he also wants human rights monitors to be let into Libya to see what is going on in that country. He also said that he thought Colonel Gaddafi's grasp on power might be crumbling.
There are many indications of the structure of the state collapsing in many ways in Libya. It's turned out it hasn't so far involved Colonel Gaddafi's departure, but the resignation of so many ambassadors and diplomats, reports of ministers changing sides within Libya itself, shows that the system is in a very serious crisis. And in that situation, those remaining in authority should be trying to protect their citizens, to maintain the safety of